The rain started before dawn, a thin, steady drizzle that turned the world gray and heavy, as if even the sky understood what this day meant. I stood under the awning outside the funeral home, staring at the darkened windows, unable to force myself inside. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself it was the cold, but I knew better. It was him. It was the fact that somewhere beyond those doors, my son, my Daniel, was lying still, silent, and impossibly gone at just 29 years old. I pressed my palm against my chest as if I could physically hold my heart together. Yesterday, I was a mother with a future full of phone calls, visits, laughter. Today, I was standing outside a building that existed for endings. Emma? The voice startled me. I turned to see Mr. Collins, the funeral director, standing in the doorway with that same gentle, practiced expression I'd already come to resent. "We're ready whenever you are." I nodded, though I wasn't ready. I would never be ready. Inside, the air smelled faintly of flowers and polish. Soft music played somewhere in the background, something slow and instrumental, as if grief needed a soundtrack. And there he was, Daniel, my boy. He looked peaceful, too peaceful. His face had that unnatural stillness that no sleep could ever explain. I stepped forward, each movement heavy, like walking through water. "I'm here," I whispered, reaching for his hand. Cold. So cold. I swallowed hard, forcing the sound back down. I had promised myself I wouldn't break. Not here. Not yet. "You always hated the cold," I murmured, my voice trembling despite my effort. "Remember winter mornings? You'd complain until I made you hot chocolate." Silence answered me, the kind that echoes. I stayed there longer than I should have, memorizing every detail, terrified that if I looked away, I'd start to forget. But eventually, the room began to fill. People arrived in quiet clusters, neighbors, old friends, co-workers. Murmurs of sympathy floated around me, words I barely heard. "I'm so sorry, Emma. He was such a good man. This is just unbelievable." I nodded, smiled faintly, accepted their hugs. It all felt distant, like I was watching someone else live through it. And then I saw her, Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. She entered like she was stepping into a social event, not a funeral. Her black dress clung too tightly, too polished, too deliberate. Her makeup was flawless, untouched by grief. She wasn't crying, not even close. Instead, she laughed. Not loudly at first, just a soft chuckle at something one of her friends said. But in a room like that, where grief hung thick in the air, even a whisper of laughter felt like a scream. Something twisted inside me. Maybe I was being unfair, I told myself. People grieve differently. Not everyone breaks down in tears. But there was something else. Something colder. Relief. I saw it in the way her shoulders relaxed, in the way she checked her phone, in the way she didn't look at Daniel. Not really. "Mrs. Turner." I turned to see Luke, Daniel's closest friend. His eyes were red, his voice raw. "I can't believe this," he said, pulling me into a tight embrace. He was fine. Just a headache, right? That's what he told me. I nodded slowly. Yes. Just a headache. And then 3 days later, he was in the ICU. And then gone. Luke stepped back, wiping his face. "If you need anything at all, I'm here." "Thank you," I whispered. His grief felt real. Solid. Like something I could hold on to. Unlike hers. Hours passed in a blur. Faces came and went. Words blurred together. And then the funeral director announced it was time for the final viewing. Family only. Vanessa walked toward me, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Let's just get this done," she said under her breath, glancing at her watch. I have a lot to handle after this.
Især det her.
For a moment, I thought I had misheard.
But no.
Her expression was impatient, almost annoyed. We stood on opposite sides of the casket. I placed my hand over Daniel's again, tears finally spilling over. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. And that's when I heard it. "So, now she'll probably end up in one of those retirement places." Vanessa's voice.
Low.
Careless.
Cruel.
One of her friends snorted softly before catching herself. My entire body went still. The words didn't just hurt, they settled into me like something permanent. So that's what she thought of me. A problem to be removed. Disposed of. I didn't turn around. I didn't speak. But something inside me shifted. Quietly. Irreversibly. After the service, as people began to leave, a man in a dark suit approached us. "Mrs. Turner?" I looked up. "Yes. My name is Andrew Hale. I was Daniel's attorney." "Attorney? I'm very sorry for your loss," he continued. "But there's something urgent we need to discuss. Both of you." Vanessa straightened immediately, interest flashing across her face. "Now?" she asked.
Yes.
"It won't take long." We followed him outside to his car. The rain had picked up, tapping softly against the roof as we settled inside. Andrew opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. "Daniel updated his will 3 days ago," he said. My heart skipped. 3 days ago. That was the ICU. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice sharp. "What does it say?" Andrew looked at her, then at me. "Daniel left everything to you, Vanessa." Her lips curved into a slow, satisfied smile. I felt nothing. Of course he did. She was his wife. But then, there is one condition. Her smile faltered. "What condition?" Andrew's voice was calm, steady. "Emma must live with you. Under the same roof." Silence. Heavy. Explosive. "If she leaves, or if you force her out, everything transfers to her immediately." Vanessa's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "He can't do that." "He already did," Andrew replied, handing her the document. It was his final decision. I sat there, stunned. Daniel, even at the end, he had been thinking of me.
Protecting me.
Vanessa slowly turned toward me. The look in her eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was something darker. Fear. Because now, whether she liked it or not, we were bound together. And I had the sinking feeling that my son knew exactly what he was doing. The first night in Vanessa's house felt colder than the funeral home, even though the heating was working perfectly. It wasn't the temperature that made me shiver. It was the silence, the kind that doesn't comfort you but watches you. Vanessa didn't help me bring my suitcase inside. She dropped it just past the doorway, like it was something she didn't want to touch for too long, and pointed lazily down the hall. "Guest rooms there. Bathroom shared. Don't rearrange anything," she said, already turning away before I could answer. I stood there for a moment, staring at the hallway that now defined my future, then slowly dragged my suitcase across the floor myself. The room she had given me wasn't really a room meant for living. It felt like a space that had been forgotten long ago, a storage area that had accidentally ended up with a bed frame inside it. The mattress was bare, no sheets, no pillows, just a thin layer of dust like no one had expected anyone to sleep there. Boxes were stacked against one wall, labeled in Vanessa's neat handwriting, winter clothes, old decor, things that mattered enough to keep but not enough to see. The closet door barely opened because an old treadmill blocked it halfway. I stood in the middle of the room and tried to imagine Daniel ever wanting me here, like this. The thought made my chest tighten. "I'll need bedding," I said quietly when I returned to the hallway. Vanessa didn't even look up from her phone. "Linen closet. Figure it out." That was the moment I understood something clearly. This wasn't going to be temporary discomfort. This was intentional. Every detail, every inconvenience, every cold glance, it was all part of something she had already decided long before Daniel died. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, fully dressed under a thin blanket I found after searching the house. Downstairs, I could hear laughter, music, glasses clinking. Vanessa had people over. Just days after the funeral, I closed my eyes, gripping Daniel's watch in my hand, the only thing I had managed to keep before she boxed up everything else. My son's home had already started to feel like a place I was trespassing in. Morning came too quickly. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of thoughts that felt too sharp to hold on to. When I walked into the kitchen, the aftermath of the night before was everywhere. Empty bottles, greasy boxes, crumbs across the counter. Vanessa was nowhere in sight. I stood there for a long moment, then quietly started cleaning. Not because I wanted to help her, but because I couldn't stand the chaos. It gave me something to do, something to focus on that wasn't grief. As I wiped down the refrigerator door, I noticed something strange. It was empty, completely bare. I remembered how it used to be, covered in photos. Daniel smiling at the beach, Daniel at his office opening, Daniel with me on my last birthday. Now there was nothing. I opened the fridge. Inside, it was nearly as empty, some yogurt, takeout containers, a bottle of wine. No sign of a home. Just evidence of someone passing through it. Over the next few days, a pattern began to form. Vanessa came and went without explanation. Sometimes she didn't return until late at night. Sometimes she brought people with her who looked at me like I didn't belong. She never told me anything, not when the internet was down, not when the water was shut off, not even when strangers were coming over. It was like I was invisible or worse, inconvenient. Then came the morning I couldn't find my medication. At first, I thought I had simply misplaced it. I checked the nightstand, my bag, the dresser, everywhere. My heart started racing, not just from panic, but because I knew how important those pills were. Finally, after nearly tearing the room apart, I found them in the bathroom cabinet, shoved behind cleaning supplies I had never touched. I stood there, holding the bottle, a slow realization creeping in. I hadn't put them there. "Vanessa," I said that evening, keeping my voice steady, "did you move my medication?" She didn't look up. "Why would I touch your stuff?" "I found it in the bathroom cabinet." She shrugged. "Maybe you forgot." "Happens, doesn't it?" There was something deliberate in the way she said it. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to make me question myself if I wasn't careful. But I was careful. I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked away. Because now I knew this wasn't random. She was trying to push me, slowly, quietly, make me uncomfortable enough to leave on my own. And if I left, she would get everything. That realization changed something in me. I stopped reacting, stopped questioning her, stopped expecting anything at all. Instead, I watched. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. I hadn't meant to listen. I was just passing by, but her tone stopped me. "No, she's still here," Vanessa said, her voice low and irritated. "I know. It's unbearable. I'm working on it." I froze. There has to be a way around it. Yeah, I checked a few places already. Cheap ones. I don't care what they're like. I just need her out. My stomach dropped. She had planned this. Even before. The comment at the funeral wasn't spontaneous. It was something she had already been thinking about. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't break. I sat quietly in my room, holding Daniel's watch, and for the first time since his death, I started thinking clearly. Why had he done it? Why that condition? Why force us to live together? Daniel was never controlling, never cruel. So, why would he tie me to someone who clearly despised me? Unless he knew. The next morning, something small but important happened. I found a photo in the trash. It had been torn in half, Daniel on one side, me on the other. She had kept his half, thrown mine away. I picked it up carefully, my hands steady now, not shaking like before. I taped the two pieces back together and placed it in my room. Not hidden, not tucked away, visible. That was the moment I made a decision. I wouldn't leave. Not for her. Not for anyone. If she wanted me gone, she would have to face me. Because I wasn't weak. I wasn't fragile. And I wasn't done. That same day, I went out and bought groceries. Real food. Fresh vegetables, meat, bread. When I came back, I cleaned the kitchen again and cooked a proper meal for the first time since arriving. When Vanessa walked in, she stopped. "What is this?" she asked. "Dinner," I replied calmly. "You can join me if you want." She stared at me, trying to understand. But I gave her nothing.
No anger.
No reaction.
No weakness.
Just calm. And that unsettled her more than anything else. Something shifted after that dinner, not in a way that made things better, but in a way that made them quieter. Vanessa stopped going out of her way to provoke me. The sharp comments didn't disappear completely, but they became less frequent, more measured, as if she was trying to understand what I was doing rather than simply attacking me. And that was exactly what I wanted. Because the truth was, I wasn't being kind for her sake. I was being patient for mine. Every morning, I woke before her. I cleaned, I cooked, I made the house feel lived in again. Not because it was mine, but because it had been Daniel's. I refused to let it remain a hollow shell of takeout boxes and empty laughter. The kitchen slowly transformed into something warm again, something familiar. The backyard, once neglected, began to show signs of life. I planted flowers, roses, mostly, red and yellow, his favorites. I remembered him once saying he wanted a garden like that. He just never had the time. Vanessa noticed, of course. She noticed everything. "You're changing things," she said one afternoon, standing at the back door, arms crossed. "I'm taking care of them," I replied, not looking up from the soil. "This isn't your house." "Our house," I corrected gently. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue further. That was becoming a pattern too. She would push, and I would respond calmly, and somehow that ended the conversation faster than any fight ever could. But beneath that fragile calm, something else was growing. Suspicion. It started small. A feeling. A question I couldn't quite form at first. Why had Daniel been so specific in his will? Why had he acted so urgently, changing everything from a hospital bed? And most importantly, why had he tied my future to hers? Daniel had never been impulsive. He had been careful, thoughtful, protective. So if he made that decision, it wasn't random. He had a reason, and I was going to find it. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Vanessa left early one morning, mentioning something about a meeting, though she didn't give details. As soon as the front door closed, I stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring toward Daniel's office. I hadn't gone in there yet. It felt wrong, like crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross. But that day, something pushed me forward. The door creaked slightly as I opened it. The room smelled faintly of him, wood, paper, a trace of his cologne still lingering in the air. His desk was exactly as he had left it. Laptop closed. Papers neatly stacked. A pen placed perfectly parallel to the edge. My chest tightened. He had been here, working, living, and then suddenly not. I stepped inside slowly, as if afraid the room might disappear if I moved too fast. My fingers brushed lightly over the desk before I sat down in his chair. For a moment, I just sat there, letting the silence settle. Then I opened the laptop. The screen lit up, asking for a password. I hesitated. This felt like a boundary. But then I thought of the will, of Vanessa, of everything that didn't make sense. And I typed the first thing that came to mind. Emma 1960. My name. My birth year. The screen unlocked instantly. My breath caught. Even now, even in something so small, he had chosen me. I swallowed hard and opened his email. There were hundreds of messages, mostly work-related. Contracts, plans, meetings. I scanned through them quickly, not really knowing what I was looking for. Then I searched her name, Vanessa. The results appeared immediately. At first, the emails were normal. Simple conversations. Logistics.
Plans.
Nothing unusual. But then something changed. I found a thread titled, "We need to talk." My hands tightened slightly as I opened it. Daniel had written, "I think we need help. Things aren't right between us anymore. I don't understand what's happening, but I don't want to lose what we had." Her reply came hours later. "We don't need therapy. We need you to decide what matters more, your mother or your wife." I stared at the screen. My stomach twisted. That wasn't frustration. That wasn't stress. That was something else.
Control.
I kept reading. There were more messages. Subtle at first, then sharper. Daniel questioning things. Vanessa deflecting. Avoiding. Redirecting. And then I saw something that made my heart stop. An email from Daniel to his lawyer. Subject: urgent. I need to update my will as soon as possible. I have concerns about my wife's intentions if something happens to me. Please treat this as a priority. My pulse quickened. He had known, or at least suspected. The next email confirmed the meeting. A meeting he never made, because instead he ended up in the hospital. I leaned back in the chair, trying to process everything. This wasn't just tension. This wasn't just a failing marriage. This was fear. Daniel had been afraid. And suddenly, the room didn't feel safe anymore. The house didn't feel safe. Because if he had been right, then I was living with someone capable of far more than cruelty. I shut the laptop quickly when I heard the front door slam. Vanessa was back. Too soon. I left the office immediately, closing the door behind me as quietly as possible, my heart racing. By the time she walked into the hallway, I was already in the kitchen, pretending to rinse a glass. "You're home early," I said casually. She studied me for a moment. "Meeting got canceled." I nodded, keeping my movement steady. "Dinner will be ready in about an hour." She didn't respond right away. Just watched me, like she was trying to see through me. But then she turned and walked away. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of grief this time. Because of realization. The pieces were starting to come together. Daniel had been worried. About her.
About me.
About something bigger than I had understood. And then something else came back to me. The headaches. How sudden they had been. How quickly everything had escalated. At the time, it had made sense. A medical emergency. Something unpredictable. But now, I wasn't so sure. The next day, I returned to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. That's when I noticed it. A slight unevenness beneath the rug. I frowned and pulled it back. A loose floorboard. My breath slowed. Carefully, I lifted it. Inside, there was something.
A book. Old.
Leather-bound. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The first page made my chest tighten instantly. Daniel's handwriting. "If you're reading this, Mom, then I couldn't say this out loud." Everything inside me went still. I turned the page and began to read. I didn't realize I had stopped breathing until my chest began to ache. The journal rested in my hands, but it felt heavier than anything I had ever held before. Not because of its weight, but because of what it contained. Daniel's thoughts, his fears, things he had never said out loud. Things he had hidden, even from me. I sat there on the floor beside my bed, the loose boards still lifted, the room around me fading into nothing as his words pulled me deeper into a reality I wasn't prepared to face. The first entries were cautious, almost hesitant, like he didn't fully trust his own suspicions yet. He wrote about Vanessa changing small things at first, a sharper tone, colder reactions, moments where she seemed distant or irritated without reason. He questioned himself, wondering if it was stress, if he was overthinking. But as the pages went on, that uncertainty disappeared. In its place came something far more dangerous: clarity. He described arguments, not loud explosive ones, but controlled, calculated ones where Vanessa twisted conversations, redirected blame, and forced him into silence. He wrote about feeling watched in his own home, about conversations that ended too quickly when he entered a room, about a growing sense that something wasn't right, but he couldn't prove it. Then came the part that made my hands start to shake. He wrote about money, large amounts disappearing from business accounts, transfers he hadn't authorized but somehow carried his digital approval. He suspected Vanessa had access, but every time he questioned her, she turned it around on him, accusing him of paranoia, of mistrust, of trying to control her. And he let it go. Not because he believed her, but because he didn't want to believe what the alternative meant. I turned the page slowly, already dreading what I would find next. He mentioned a name.
Ethan.
At first, just briefly. A colleague. Someone Vanessa worked with occasionally. But then the entries grew more specific. Late-night messages. Sudden meetings. Phone calls that ended the moment Daniel walked into the room. He never accused her outright, but the implication was clear. He knew, or at least he was close to knowing. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a failing marriage. This was betrayal. But it didn't stop there. The final entries were different. The handwriting less steady. The sentences shorter, more urgent. He wrote about headaches. Severe ones. Sudden. Blinding. He described dizziness, moments where his vision blurred, where he had to sit down just to stay conscious. Vanessa had dismissed it as stress, told him he was overworking, that he needed rest. But he wasn't convinced. He wrote that the headaches started shortly after a major argument, one about me. About him insisting that I would always have a place in his life, in his home, no matter what. And then the entry that made my heart stop. He wrote that he had caught Vanessa going through his phone. Not just checking something. Reading. Watching. Monitoring. That same morning, he wrote, she had made him coffee. Insisted he drink it before leaving. Said it would help his headache. I feel strange, he wrote. Not just pain, something else. Like my body isn't responding the way it should. That was the day he collapsed. The pen strokes on that page were uneven, as if his hand had been trembling when he wrote it. I pressed my fingers against the ink, as if somehow I could reach through time and stop him from drinking that cup, from trusting her one last time. The final page was different.
Short.
Written with effort. If you're reading this, Mom, then I was right to be afraid. My vision blurred instantly. I don't have proof. Only patterns. Only instincts. But something is wrong. If anything happens to me, don't trust her. I've spoken to Andrew. He knows what to do. The will, it's the only way I could think to keep you safe. A tear fell onto the page. I'm sorry I couldn't protect myself. But I will protect you. I closed the journal slowly, my entire body numb. For a long time I didn't move, didn't think, didn't even cry. Because crying would have made it real. And I wasn't ready for that yet. But eventually reality forced its way in. Daniel hadn't just been worried. He had been preparing. Preparing for something he believed might happen. And now he was gone. I carefully placed the journal back beneath the floorboard, covering it exactly as I had found it. If Vanessa discovered it, everything would fall apart before I was ready. And I wasn't ready, not yet. I needed more. More proof. More certainty. Because what I had now, it was enough to terrify me, but not enough to act. That evening, Vanessa came home earlier than usual. She looked tired, distracted. She didn't even comment on dinner when she saw it prepared on the table. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat down, staring into it like she was trying to find answers at the bottom. "You've been different lately," she said suddenly. I sat across from her, calm. "In what way?" She shrugged slightly. "Quiet. Cooperative. It's strange." "I'm adjusting," I replied simply. "We both are." She studied me, her eyes narrowing just slightly. For a moment, I thought she might push further, ask questions. But instead, she leaned back. "Good," she said, "because I don't have the energy for drama." Neither do I thought. But I said nothing, because now I understood something important. This wasn't about surviving her anymore. This was about uncovering the truth. And that required patience. The next step came the following day. After Vanessa left, I didn't hesitate this time. I went straight to Daniel's office, turned on his laptop, and began digging deeper. Emails weren't enough. I needed records, files, anything that could connect the pieces I now had. It didn't take long to find something. A folder labeled simply, Accounts. Inside were spreadsheets, transactions, transfers. At first, it looked normal. Then I noticed the pattern. Large amounts of money being moved in intervals. Not random, calculated.
Timed.
And every transaction had authorization. Vanessa's. My breath slowed. Daniel hadn't imagined it.
He had been robbed.
By his own wife. I copied everything onto a flash drive I found in the drawer. My hands were steady now.
No hesitation.
No fear. Just focus. Because now I had something real. Something that could be proven.
But there was still one piece missing.
Intent. And I had a feeling that piece would come from her. I just had to wait. And listen. By the time the truth fully settled inside me, I was no longer afraid of Vanessa. That was the strangest part of it all. The woman who had once made me feel small, unwanted, and fragile now felt predictable. Dangerous, yes, but no longer powerful. Because power only exists when you don't understand it, and now I understood exactly who she was, what she had done, and what she was still capable of doing if given the chance. The fear didn't disappear. It transformed into something quieter, sharper. Control. From that point on, every move I made had purpose. I didn't rush. I didn't confront her. I didn't even change my behavior in any noticeable way. I kept cooking, cleaning, smiling politely, letting her believe that whatever suspicion she once had about me had faded into harmless acceptance. And slowly, just like I hoped, she relaxed. Not completely, but enough. She started leaving her phone unattended, taking longer calls in the house without stepping outside, letting small details slip in conversation. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would alarm anyone who wasn't looking for it. But I was looking, listening, watching. And piece by piece, the truth began to show itself. The first real crack came one evening when she didn't realize I was in the hallway. She was on the phone, her voice low but not careful enough. "I told you, I'm handling it," she said, pacing slowly near the kitchen. "No, she's still here because of that stupid clause. I can't force her out." A pause, then a sharper tone. "I know what we agreed on. Just give me time." My heart slowed, not sped up, because now I wasn't reacting. I was confirming. Another pause, then quieter. No, he didn't suspect anything at the end. He was already too sick. A silence followed that felt heavier than anything she had said before. Too sick. I stepped back before she could notice me, retreating silently into my room.
I didn't need to hear the rest.
That one sentence echoed louder than anything else. He was already too sick. Not suddenly sick. Not unexpectedly. Already. That meant time. Planning. And that meant intent. The next morning, I called Andrew. "I need your help," I said. There was no hesitation in my voice anymore. He must have heard it. "Tell me," he replied. We met that afternoon in his office. I brought everything: the copied files, the journal entries I had photographed, and a recording I had managed to capture the night before. Not everything was clear. Not everything was enough on its own, but together it formed something undeniable. Andrew listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each piece. "This changes everything," he said finally. "Is it enough?" I asked. "For an investigation?"
Yes.
"For a conviction?" "That depends on what else we can uncover. But this gives us a reason to look deeper." I nodded slowly. "That's all I need." The next step required precision. Andrew contacted Vanessa the following day, telling her there was an issue with the will that required immediate clarification. Something about a potential legal gap. I knew exactly how she would react. Opportunity. She agreed to meet him without hesitation. And while she was distracted, everything else moved into place. Andrew had already coordinated with law enforcement. The financial evidence alone was enough to justify further investigation, and combined with the recording, they were able to move quickly. That morning, I stayed home, waiting.
The house felt different that day.
Still, like it knew something was about to happen. Hours passed slowly. I didn't pace. I didn't panic. I sat in the living room, hands resting calmly in my lap, Daniel's watch wrapped around my fingers. Then the phone rang.
"It's done," Andrew said.
My eyes closed for a moment. "She tried to bribe me," he continued. "Offered money in exchange for losing the original will. We recorded everything." A breath left my chest. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just finality. "Thank you," I said quietly. But it wasn't over yet. Not until she knew. The front door opened violently about 30 minutes later. Vanessa stepped inside, her face flushed with fury, her composure completely gone. Behind her stood 2 officers. Her eyes locked onto me instantly. "You," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "You did this." I stood slowly, calm.
"No, irraplia."
"You did." "Don't pretend you don't know," she snapped, stepping closer. "You've been watching me, digging through things, setting me up." I didn't raise my voice, didn't step back.
"You stole from him," I said.
"From your own husband." Her expression flickered, just for a second, and in that second,
I saw it. Guilt.
then anger rushed back in to cover it. "You have no proof," she said. One of the officers stepped forward.
"Vedo, ma'am."
That's when it hit her. Really hit her. Her confidence cracked. "You don't understand," she said quickly, her tone shifting, desperate now. He was controlling. He didn't trust me. I had no choice. No choice. I interrupted quietly. For the first time, my voice carried something. Not anger.
Truth.
You had choices every single day. You just didn't like the ones that didn't benefit you. She stared at me, and then she stopped fighting. Not because she accepted it, but because she realized it was over. As the officers stepped closer, she looked at me one last time. And there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not hatred. Not anger.
Fear.
Because now she understood something she never had before. I wasn't weak. I never had been. And I wasn't alone. Because Daniel had seen everything. Even when he couldn't stop it, he had still found a way to protect me. They let her out without another word. The door closed. And just like that, the house was silent again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was empty, peaceful. Weeks passed after that. The investigation uncovered everything: the money, the transfers, the connection to the man she had been speaking to, the manipulation, the lies. Even the medical findings raised serious questions about what had happened to Daniel in those final days. Nothing could bring him back, but the truth was no longer hidden. And that mattered. More than anything. I didn't stay in that house. I couldn't. Too many memories. Too many shadows. Instead, I sold it. And with what remained, what Daniel had protected, I built something new. A small home. Simple.
Warm.
With a garden in the back. Roses. Red and yellow. Just like he wanted. On the first evening there, I sat outside as the sun began to set, the air soft and quiet around me. I held his watch in my hands, turning it slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had happened.
Loss.
Betrayal.
Truth.
Justice. All of it had led me here, to a place I never expected to reach. Peace didn't come all at once. It never does. But it came in moments, in silence that didn't hurt, in memories that didn't break me, in the quiet understanding that I had survived something meant to destroy me. I looked out at the garden, at the first small buds beginning to open. Life.
Continuing.
I'm still here, I whispered softly. And for the first time since the day everything broke, I truly believed it.